Jenny, are you there? Hello.
I am here. Hello, everybody.
You saw the new AMD stuff, so talk to us.
I did. I stood in its presence. I almost touched it.
Almost, they wouldn't let you touch it?
Well, I probably could have, but it would have been weird.
Okay,
so I started out just heading to E3 this week because I had a badge, and then Steve contacted me and was like, hey, you want to go to this AMD thing? I can get you in. And I said, sure, it's probably a launch event. So we started out there in the morning at the Belasco Theater, which is really cool and built in 1926. And I was way more fascinated with the theater than pretty much anything else. But
how was like AMD's event? Like, did they set it up all nice and make it look really cool and stuff, or what?
Well, the Belasco Theater doesn't need decoration, so I think that's why they chose it. The economy of the place is spot on. I mean, it's all painted red and gold, so they just kind of lit it red and excuse me, but they didn't have any food. There's some like Minute Maid lemonade in the back. I don't know if it's because you're not allowed to eat in the theater or what, but there were like Dimitri came out for it. AMD actually flew him down to go to their event, and he was basically held hostage all day in that theater with no food.
Okay, so what we've learned so far, nothing about the graphics cards, but they held Dimitri hostage and refused to feed him in a lavish theater.
Scott Wasson from Tech Report was also in that pile. By the time I came back at 5 o'clock, they were both just like clawing the walls looking for a hamburger. So they sent out the bald man, the British bald man, who tried to like get us all amped up and stuff, but it was 9 o'clock in the morning and we'd all been in traffic for 2.5 hours to get there, so nobody really cared. We just wanted to see the graphics cards. And reveal them they did. Dr. Lisa Su came out and she showed us the 300 series, which was kind of like the meh heard around the world. It became very apparent to us very quickly what was going on. The lower end 370 and 380, or no, the 360 and 370 cards are just going to be the 285 or 260X kind of rebranded, except for the 260X is actually still better than either one of those cards.
You mean wait? You mean the 290X or which one are you?
No. I'm talking about the lower end.
Oh, the
I'm talking
lower
about the
end
R7.
stuff. Okay. Oh, okay.
So
R7.
in the new R7 300 series, we've got a couple of cards. Those are the first two they showed us. And those two cards are direct rebrands, except for if you buy a 260X on sale, you're still getting a better card than either one of those.
That's really curious. I mean,
just even on paper, like you just compare the like clock speeds and everything else.
I mean, shouldn't it be a lower, I guess, power consumption since it's a slightly better manufacturing process, even though it's almost the same? But it
not for the R7s.
No, pretty much the same stuff.
It's the same stuff.
Yeah, I never pay attention to the lower end cards, but I don't know. I've never really used one.
Well, they're really competitively priced. They're $109 to like $130. And so if you're a first time builder and you're in high school and maybe you're saving up your lunch money to build your first computer, these are the cards for you. They're trying to market them as cards for esports players who don't really need intensive graphic experiences, but
and Hearthstone and all the Blizzard games and whatever.
Pretty much. So then they bring out the R9 series. So that's going to be the R9 380, 390, and 390X cards. And everybody's kind of, bitching and moaning online about how those cards are now still rebrands of the 290X. And they kind of are, but they kind of aren't. So I don't know why anyone expected the 300 series to have a completely new architecture, because historically AMD has never done that. Neither has NVIDIA. What they did was they took the architecture of the Hawaii XT that they put out, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now, and they improved upon it. So they gave it a slightly faster clock and core speeds, and then they did the better power consumption. So they're saying that it's supposed to save up to 10% power and give you that much more back in performance. But until, I don't know, I'm a skeptic. Until I see the benchmarks, I'm really not believing it. And I want to see what Sapphire does with it when they get their card, because all of the coolest 290Xs come out of Sapphire. When they get a hold of them, they tweak them, they make them as bad as they can be. And so when that 8 gigabyte 390X hits Ed's hands, I'm kind of excited about that.
We were not paid by Sapphire at all.
We were not paid by Sapphire. Ed has never met me. I promise. He doesn't even know who I am.
I want to say, like, I actually emailed Ed today saying, like, dude, where's the Fury? I want the Fury, and I don't want AMD's version. And he was like, well, the Fury's kind of an AMD thing, but I can't say much else. So when he says I can't say much else, to me that means they're probably working on their own version that's going to have their fancy air cooling unit on it. I would much rather have their air cooling unit than that big water cooling unit, even though it may work out just fine to have a water cooling unit. But I just want it to be smaller and quiet and whatever. I mean, the water cooling you may need it, but I don't know.
I should hope not. I mean, if it's the Fiji cards are supposed to be running so much cooler than the Hawaii cards that if they need to be water cooled, I think there's a problem.
Well, I mean, the first one, the Fury, is going to be like a water cooled out of the box, right?
The Fury X will be, the Fury X is going to be water cooled. So they're going to release that first for some reason, and then the air cooled unit's coming out at some undisclosed time before the end of the summer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all the people who really, really want the crazy stuff are going to go for that right off the bat.
So Dr. Lisa Su's comments on the Fury X were that it's going to be able to run 5K at 45 FPS. Cool.
Yeah,
who has optimized anything for 5K? Yeah, which game?
Which game, yeah.
Minecraft.
That game's actually
the only one that matters.
That game is pretty difficult to run. I mean, was it Java?
And also, she's saying that with the high bandwidth memory, you're going to get 1.5 times performance per watt over the previous GPU.
Not to mention, it's like a gajillion times better as far as overall bandwidth goes. The high bandwidth memory is really ridiculous, and you also save about 90% of your board real estate. That's why the graphics card is so small. So because they're just stacking
when she brought out
memory.
the little 6-inch Nano, I was like, oh, why couldn't we call that the Fury?
They should put one of these on it and call it the Furry. This is the Furry. It's cute. Yeah, just give it a tail. That's all it needs.
But as far as Fiji goes, I mean, they put up a few screens of the specs, which I sent you the pictures of.
They're on the screen right now.
And I'm sure they're all over the internet too, so you guys can look these up too. But they're touting 4096 stream processors, 8.6 teraflops, 8.9 billion transistors from the 6.3 billions on the 290X. It is impressive, but I was at the release for the 980 when NVIDIA did it, and even though everybody got all up in arms about the actual memory usage of the 970s, they went through meticulously at that presentation all of the engineering behind the design, which I really appreciated. But AMD's people kept saying, we're not going to bore you with all the technical stuff. And I'm looking at Scott Wasson and I'm like, who do they think they're talking to?
The people of Forbes.
Yeah, really. Who's in charge there that's sending stuff to Forbes? AMD. We are the people who should be having. We should have this. Dimitri should have this. Paul should have one. Forbes can have the sloppy seconds. Does Paul already have one?
For some reason, we're pretty much the only people who don't have one right now. I don't know why that is.
What do you mean we don't?
A Fury or a 390X?
Well, either. We wouldn't be allowed to say if we had a Fury right now. That's all under NDA still.
Yeah, they'll get furious.
Best Buy is selling the 390X. I almost bought one, but then I looked at the Hard OCP benchmarks. Hard OCP has a nice sort of benchmark set. And they were like, all right, why don't we, they got one of the MSI ones. So they were like, all right, why don't we downclock the memory in the core clock and then run a bunch of benchmarks to see how the new 390X stacks up to the 290X. And with that difference, with the core clock and the stock clock being basically identical, the only difference there is the 4 versus 8 gigabytes of RAM. And so they ran a bunch of tests, and they ran a bunch of tests at 4K, and the performance was basically identical.
Yeah, I've actually tried out. I've got the Sapphire 8 gigabyte card, and most games don't really care. They're like, oh, 8 gigabytes. I was only going to use 3, but thanks, So even at 4K, I was able to see some pretty good jumps in a game like Max Payne, because Max Payne you can layer so many filters in Max Payne that the game will use like as much 6 gigabytes of RAM. Thanks, I'll have it for lunch. Whatever you need. Oh, you want to run MSAA with FXAA and some other filters on top of that? Sure, we'll do it. So that game can really go crazy. Crysis can really go crazy, and you do see advantages, but you're not going to see like from me looking at the screen. I actually thought it looked worse. Adding that many filters actually made it look blurry on my 4K monitor. So I took off some filters, and then it didn't matter anymore because it wasn't using more than 4 gigabytes. So
we were goofing off at the office, and we happened to have two 8 gig 290Xs that they're owned. We bought them, and not for goofing off, but for people, because things and just
we were paid to do this.
And the 8 gigabyte did seem to make a difference in SLI. Unfortunately, the two cards that we were using to test that were owned by different people, so it was not all about an SLI configuration. But I got the 4 gig card, and then it was like, well, let's see what happens with two 290Xs with 8 gigs and SLI, just for giggles.
Wait, you're saying SLI, and I'm going to leave this in the video. I'm not going to cut it out because technically you are correct. I just want to shut up the people in the comments before they even start.
I'm sorry, it's Crossfire.
Crossfire is a marketing term. SLI is the actual technology. So anyway, go ahead.
Well, no, SLI will always be scanline interleave to me because of those voodoo bastards. So
yeah. Now you've got people going like, "What are they talking?" Now they're talking about some kind of magic. I don't even know.
Yeah. But it did seem to make a difference having the 8 gigs in the SLI scenario and really high resolutions. So I take that with a grain of salt. We need to formally test that, but we lack the hardware to do it because we're small potatoes YouTube chumps.
So we've made so many videos saying that AMD is decent for the money over the last couple of years. Those arguments still kind of hold up with some of the newer Intel stuff. It's becoming less relevant, and they need to release some new architecture. But here's where I'm going with this. Right now, we've been kind of joking around about them, and you've been saying SLI instead of Crossfire, and Jenny was underwhelmed with their presentation. I bet now is the time that they're actually going to contact us and be like, "Hey, you guys are great." That's probably what's going to happen.
The one thing that they did bring out that I was like, that was the Quantum, and everybody is like, living room PC. But after Computex and seeing everybody's newest, living room PC console killing situations, I have to say that the AMD Quantum just wiped the flippin' floor on looks alone. I would have that thing in my living room. It is freaking cool looking. It's got this cool square base that arcs up into this little pedestal that's holding up another square pedestal on top of it. It illuminates all red on the inside. Just gorgeous. And that's going to have a dual Fiji card water cooled inside of it for fuck all who knows. I mean, you're going to run your TV off of this, not
I don't know.
25 monitor setup.
People are going to get 4K TVs, and I mean, if you've got the power in there, why not play some games in there? And if you guys,
yeah, you totally could.
And if you guys get the lapdog for $179.99 plus shipping and handling, then you can play games in your living room too.
I'll put a different spin on this. I think if they can ramp up the production, because I was really curious to see if maybe the 390Xs were produced not with TSMC, because that was a thing that's happening, and I don't really like, if there's a mailing list, I want on the mailing list. I keep asking to be on the AMD mailing list, but we can't even get that. But I was curious if the 390X was a different fabrication facility, even though they haven't changed the die. That's okay. Intel uses that strategy. They'll tweak their hardware at one fab process, and then they'll leave the hardware alone, and then do the die shrink thing, and
start retooling at the other place.
Yeah, they haven't done the die shrink thing, but they are working with a fabrication foundry other than TSMC, so that might be part of it. But now that it's coming out, I don't think so. But they do have sort of a trajectory here, and so if we look at the changes that AMD's made over the last year, we're talking about year, 2 years. We're talking about dramatic driver improvements. At this point, I think that in the NVIDIA camp with the dual card situation, we're talking about a 25 to 30% performance increase when you add the second graphics card. AMD had the frame stutter problem, which was god awful, and there were a lot of problems. But the driver quality and the stability of the driver and the performance improvement in a 2-card situation with AMD has dramatically improved. At this point, that second card that you add with AMD is a 40-50% performance improvement over a single card, which, a theoretical maximum would be a doubling. So, there's still room to go. And if AMD continues on this trajectory, then they may have a compelling case for an SLI situation. The HBM being stacked on the die means that you end up with a physically smaller card. There's physically enough room, you could probably get 3 of those on a card for something really crazy performance. But I think that this is going to be the first generation of thing that actually produces 40, 50, 60 FPS on 4K. Because if you can imagine HBM in a die shrunk configuration after they get everything going with their new fab partner, which is probably at least a year off, the dual GPU situation becomes really a lot more enticing. Because like from a fabrication standpoint, soldering that GPU and then a whole bunch of high bandwidth memory and making sure you don't have duds is a different value proposition, is a different manufacturing proposition than soldering on 2 sort of pre-built, pre-tested HBM units. So you can dud the HBM units separately from the whole assembly, whereas right now the whole assembly with the RAM tends to be dudded, and then they may be reworked, and then those may show up on Alibaba. And so I think from a manufacturing standpoint, they're in a better position having those quantized units from assembly. Maybe not yet in terms of, like having all the assembly tooling, but I think that this type of technology, you may see, dual chips on graphics cards again, or 3 chips, or maybe 4 chips if they can shrink it all down.
Well, I did throw up a picture of Dr. Lisa Su holding the PCB with the dual Fiji GPU on it that they revealed later at the intensely boring PC gaming show. Man. Like, oh, God.
PCs are not for gaming, they're for taxes.
It was a good attempt. I'll leave it at that. But my butt was so sore and numb from sitting in that wood folding chair for 2 hours and 45 minutes, waiting for her to come back out and show us the damn dual GPU PCB, that we had to sit through all of these game trailers and stuff, which were, whatever. So they talked about VR today. Right now has a 2K per resolution per eye, but to make it the experience we all want it to be, their goal is to get 16K per eye. So that's AMD's kind of goal for themselves in their VR development. They want a 120 to 240 hertz refresh rate with that, and greater than 1 petaflop for the GPU engine. So I think that's really ambitious, and I'm excited to see them aspire to that. They certainly seem to be investing a lot in it. I still didn't get to try any demonstrations of it, but hey, I like the competition in the market.
So next time AMD, you want to see more of the nerdy stuff, more tech specs, similar to what NVIDIA did at some of their events. Trust us with the information, really. It's just trust that we can handle it. We understand. It's okay. I feel like a lot of companies, not just AMD, but I mean Intel is doing this as well. They're switching over to this new thing where they're trying to support people who have large Twitter followings and people who are social influencers who maybe are kind of vapid when it comes to the type of content they produce. And I'm not sure if that shift is in their long-term best interest. What they're missing out on is they're hitting the masses, but the evangelists are the ones who care about the actual tech specs. And then those guys are going to go out and tell all their friends, hey, have you heard about this? It's really cool. And their friends may not understand, but they're going to hit a lot of the same audience, just they're not going to get the same numbers on social media. You know what I mean? Because they're going to hit people like us, and we're going to go out and, hey, that's cool. Let's talk about the nerdy stuff. And we're going to go have a beer and talk to our friends about it.